Hello there. Tonight, we are going to slip quietly into the marbled streets and perfume rooms of ancient Athens, though not the postcard version with gleaming temples and bold philosophers in white chitons. No, you're waking up on a thin mat in a dim corner of a sprawling villa where the silence is thick and the morning sun slices through latticed shutters like it's searching for you. The floor beneath you is cool, the air already carrying the scent of fig leaves and someone else's breakfast. It's quiet, not peaceful, more like the stillness you feel when you're being watched. Because you are. You probably won't survive a day here with your modern sense of justice or your insistence on boundaries. There's no room for that where you are now. You belong to someone, not officially maybe, but everyone knows it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. Your name is not important anymore. It was once back when you were free, or at least more free than this. But here in this villa, names are not as useful as glances, gestures, or silences. You open your eyes before anyone calls for you, because to wait until summoned might already be too late. The cook's assistant might be rattling pots somewhere far off. But your first responsibility is not the hearth. It's him. The man who owns this place. The one who owns you. Technically, no, he doesn't own you like a slave. You're not branded. You might even be what they call freeborn, which in theory should mean something. But here it doesn't. He paid for you. Whether in coin or favor or influence, he claimed you. And in Athens, where status is everything and power flows like wine, nobody questions that kind of transaction too closely. You dress quickly in silence. Your tunic is thin, soft, and dyed with a color that would be far too showy for a proper citizen. But that's the point. You're not a citizen. You're a spectacle. As you cross the inner courtyard, the morning light spills across the mosaic floor in warm golds and terracottas. A delicate geometric pattern, perfect symmetry, just like everything here seems to be. But beneath it all, like the cracks beneath plaster, is something else. You feel it every time your bare feet touch these polished stones. His chamber door is half open. You pause. You never enter first, not unless he told you to. Instead you wait, body relaxed, but alert. The kind of posture you've perfected, always ready, never eager. When he finally waves you in with a lazy flick of his wrist, you step forward with your head slightly bowed, eyes soft, voice ready, but quiet. He may want music, or a cup of cool water, or your company while he reads aloud some treatise by Xenophon he only half understands. Or he may want none of that, just you nearby, just stillness. This is not love. It's not mentorship, though that's what they'll call it later in philosophy circles. This is performance. And you are the theater, the actor, and the scenery all at once. Outside, you hear a rooster crow and laughter echoing from the street. Probably boys your age, real citizens throwing dice or play fighting in the alley. You envy their noise, their freedom to be ungraceful, to yell, to sweat. You envy the messiness of a life not curated. Here inside the villa, nothing is messy. Everything is composed, including you. Even the way you pour wine must be elegant. Even your silences must be well-timed. Historians still debate whether concubinage in Athens was ever about affection, ever about mutual connection. Some say it was a kind of love, hidden and tender. Others, many others, say it was simply another form of dominance dressed up in pretty words and prettier people. You don't need historians to tell you what this is. You serve him his morning draught of diluted wine, 3 parts water, like they do in the symposiums. He drinks it absent-mindedly, already lost in thought. You wait. He'll gesture again soon, and you'll move. Or you won't. That's the game. Later today there may be guests. You'll prepare for that. You'll bathe in the little basin in the side chamber, cold water, always cold. You'll oil your skin, brush your hair, maybe wear the gold-threaded belt he likes. You don't ask why. You don't ask anything. Your curiosity is not part of your value. It's a curious detail, but some concubines like you were taught to play instruments to sing or even recite poetry. Not for your own joy, of course, but to make the villa's evenings more beautiful. You think about that sometimes, how your skills are not your own, how your talent is part of someone else's reputation. This morning, though, there's no music yet. Just sunlight creeping across the floor and the knowledge that your day, like every day, belongs to someone else. You'll move when asked, smile when expected, and vanish when convenient. Because here in ancient Athens, some people are born to speak in the agora to shape the city's future with their voices, and others like you are born to stay quiet. You're beautiful. That's the problem. You didn't ask to be, and you didn't design your face like a sculptor chipping at marble, but here you are, painted in soft symmetry, a figure more observed than heard. And in ancient Athens, beauty, especially in young men, is as much a commodity as oil or olives. The kind of beauty that makes older men pause mid-sentence, the kind that invites unsolicited hands at symposiums, the kind that ruins you without ever raising a bruise. You've learned that the compliment "you're lucky to be so handsome" is rarely followed by anything that feels lucky. In this city of thinkers, warriors, and orators, being pretty is your job, your prison, and your entire resume. It probably started innocently. A neighbor, a friend of the family, someone you trusted noticed your face had sharpened into something striking. You didn't know yet what that meant, but they did. And then the invitations began, the favors, the attention, the small tokens of interest that over time became obligations. Maybe your family was poor. Maybe your father had debts. Maybe your mother cried quietly the night you were given to a patron with influence. And maybe she told herself you'd be cared for, fed, safe. Safety is a strange word, isn't it? You're fed, you have shelter, you sleep on clean linen, but you've learned how unsafe safety can feel when it comes at the price of your agency. You're not beaten, not like the labor slaves out in the fields. You don't carry amphorae or 10 sheep. Your hands are soft, unscarred, but you'd trade them in a heartbeat for the freedom to get calluses honestly. You'd rather stink of sun and sweat than of perfumed oil. This morning, your patron commented on your cheekbones. Not to you, of course, not directly. He said it to a guest as you served figs and honey. He's kept his shape nicely, don't you think? It's so rare past 17. You smiled. That soft, empty smile you've perfected. The one that says, yes, I hear you, and no, I will not react. That smile is your armor. It protects the last thread of dignity you've managed to keep tucked behind your molars. A curious detail, though, in some philosophical texts, they say the ideal male form is not too muscular, not too thin, with skin like polished marble and the demeanor of quiet reserve. That's you. Or at least what they've trained you to be. You don't eat too much, you wouldn't dare. You sleep lightly, always attuned to the possibility of being summoned at odd hours. You bathe often, not because you enjoy it, but because uncleanliness is seen as defiance. You've become a living sculpture. Historians still debate whether the young men kept in households like yours were ever truly seen as equals behind closed doors. The popular myth is one of mentorship, of a wiser older man guiding a beautiful youth into moral and civic excellence. But you've read enough between the lines to know that the truth is stickier. The truth is that beauty in boys was both fetishized and feared. Celebrated in poetry, hidden in practice, and punished if it ever tried to claim its own voice. There's another boy, slightly older than you, who used to serve in this house. You never met him, but sometimes you see his things: a worn sandal in the storage room, a chipped comb tucked in the bottom drawer of the dressing cabinet. He's gone now. No one talks about where. He aged out, probably. Replaced. Maybe he found another patron. Maybe he ended up in the streets. Maybe worse. That's the cruel curve of being a concubine. Your beauty is your ticket in, and its eventual fading is your silent dismissal. You once heard your patron say over dinner with a visiting friend, "They age so fast, it's a shame." As if you were milk, as if time itself was a betrayal. When you pass a polished bronze mirror, you have started checking for lines. for a sagging in the corner of your eyes, for anything that might signal the beginning of the end. The fear isn't vanity, it's survival. Some mornings you long to cut your hair, just shear it all off. Maybe then the illusion would crack. Maybe then they'd see you as a person, not a possession. But you know what happens to boys who challenge the aesthetic? They're not freed. They're discarded. You know your body is washed. Every line, every curl of hair, every bit of flesh shown or hidden is part of a presentation designed by someone else. Your tunic is slightly sheer, not enough to be scandalous, just enough to provoke. Your sandals are tied with deliberate carelessness. Your hair is oiled but not styled. It must seem natural even though it takes half an hour to achieve. The irony, you don't feel beautiful. Not anymore. When you look in the mirror, all you see is a performance. A creature wearing your skin, smiling your smile, but hollow behind the eyes. You miss feeling messy, flawed, real. You once saw a boy in the market with dirt on his chin and a ripped chiton. He laughed with his friends, spit a grape seed into the street, and shouted something crude about wrestling. You envied him so completely it made your throat burn. Not because he was free, but because he wasn't being curated. There are rules, unspoken ones, about how you move. Don't be too fast, that's unrefined. Don't slump, that's disrespectful. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't eat too slowly or too hungrily or too visibly. You exist to be consumed, not to consume. It's a strange thing being desired for something that was never yours to control. Your eyelashes, your hips, your voice when it hits that particular note. None of it feels like yours anymore. A tutor once came to the house, a soft-spoken man who taught your patron's son how to read Homer. He smiled at you once. Not lecherously, kindly, like you were real. You still think about that. You try to smile back, not the blank smile, a real one, and your patron noticed. The tutor was never invited again. Sometimes when the house is quiet, you hum under your breath. Songs from your childhood. The silly ones with clapping and rhymes. It's the only place you're allowed to go that doesn't belong to him. The past. The part of you before the beauty. You know this won't last. Not because someone told you, but because it never does. The moment your body shifts, the moment your face changes, the moment you lose that soft-edged glow, they'll find another. They always do. There's a line in a play you overheard once. Even flowers, when plucked, too soon begin to rot in the vase. You're the flower, but you're not in water. You're in amber, preserved for someone else's pleasure, slowly suffocating. The boys in the street laugh again. You hear them through the shutters. One of them sings off-key, another curses at the dice. They sound awful and free. You press your hand to the window frame just once before turning back to the room, to the mirror, to the tunic, to the carefully arranged body that does not feel like your own. This is the price of beauty in ancient Greece. You're not a slave. That's what they keep telling you in case you ever forget to feel grateful. You're not like them, they say with a half-smile, eyes flicking toward the kitchen where a man is grinding barley with red raw hands. You're special. But special doesn't buy you freedom. It doesn't grant you the right to say no. It just means your chains are silk. You have no legal document that declares you someone's property. You wear no collar. There's no brand on your shoulder. But your time, your body, and your choices aren't yours, and haven't been for a long while. In ancient Athens, freedom is an idea carved in stone and held tight by those who are allowed to claim it. Everyone else just decorates the margins. If a visitor asked about you, your patron would likely chuckle and say you're a companion, a student, maybe even a favorite. Euphemisms flow more easily than truth in the marble halls of the elite. He won't call you what you are, a concubine, not in public. That word tastes too much like truth. He prefers to think of himself as a generous mentor. You should be honored, really. That's the story he tells himself. That you are lucky to be here, chosen to be molded under his guidance. But you know what guidance looks like when it comes at the end of a wine-drenched hand. You remember the first time he corrected you. You'd said something too clever during a gathering, nothing rude, just a witty observation about the color of a guest's chiton. There was laughter. Too much, apparently. Later that night, he pulled you aside with a voice dipped in honey and iron. Remember, he said, one hand heavy on your shoulder, you're here to listen, not to shine. You didn't sleep well that night. Not because he struck you, he didn't need to. Just the warning in his tone was enough to wrap itself around your ribs and squeeze. It's a curious detail, but Athenian law complex, and supposedly just never figured out what to do with someone like you. They had scrolls of regulations for citizens' detailed property rights, clauses for slaves, even legal boundaries in marriage contracts. But you are an exception. A silent agreement, a body without a bracket. Historians still debate whether this legal ambiguity was accidental or intentional. Some argue it was an oversight society couldn't categorize you, so it didn't try. Others suggest it was precisely the point. By not formalizing your status, they could enjoy every advantage without the burden of responsibility. And it works. You can't testify in court. If your patron beat you or worse, there is no magistrate who would listen. There's no tribunal for bruised pride or broken dignity. Your body, while not legally branded, might as well be, because no one will fight for it, no one but you. And that too is a battle you're not allowed to win. In the marketplace, you walk a step behind, not too close, he doesn't want people to talk. But not too far. You're still his after all. He doesn't introduce you to his friends. He doesn't need to. They know who you are by how you dress, how you lower your eyes, how you wait in the shade while the free men argue over olives and law. Sometimes when he's in a good mood, he buys you something. A new tunic, a necklace. Once a pair of soft leather sandals that didn't fit quite right, but were too beautiful to discard. It's not generosity, it's control. The better your cage, the less likely you are to dream of escape. And escape is always on your mind. Not in the grand dramatic way you'd find in a tragedy. There's no plan to scale the walls under moonlight, no secret stash of coins under your bed. Just the ache of imagining another kind of morning, one where no one's watching, one where your name is your own. But then reality taps your shoulder. You have no trade, no family nearby, no connections. Even if you ran, where would you go? You know the streets. You've seen what happens to the boys with no patron. Some end up in brothels, their beauty auctioned nightly to drunken sailors. Others vanish. And besides, you're not sure you'd make it out of the house. You overheard once whispers in the corridor about a concubine who tried to leave. He made it as far as the docks. They brought him back, bruised, mute. After that, the story stops. You're not sure if he was killed or sold. No one asked, no one cared. There's a kitchen boy, Damon, maybe 15, who sometimes watches you with wide eyes. He brings your meal when the others are busy. Once he asked, is it true you don't have to scrub floors? You shrugged. He smiled like you were lucky. Like your soft hands and clean clothes meant you were better off. But you saw the confusion in his face when you didn't smile back. What would you say to him that you'd trade the silks for his sunburns, that scrubbing floors would mean looking people in the eye again? There's dignity in doing something that matters, in lifting a jar, folding linen, shaping dough. Your labor, if you can call it that, is to be pleasing, not useful, not respected, just present, pretty, quiet. Some days when your patron is gone, you sneak outside just to the inner courtyard. You sit by the little fountain and press your hand against the sun-warm stone. You close your eyes and imagine you're somewhere else. Somewhere where people see you, not your face. Somewhere where your voice doesn't need permission. But the footsteps always come, a servant, a guard, a shadow, and back you go. Your room is small, but not unpleasant. There's a cushion stuffed with wool, a window that doesn't open, and a bronze mirror polished, until your own reflection becomes your most frequent visitor. You hate that mirror, and yet you can't stop checking it. Every wrinkle, every line, every change in your skin feels like a countdown. Because when your beauty fades, so does your purpose. And what happens then? You've heard stories. Some are passed to other patrons, some are discarded. Some try to reclaim their lives and end up crushed by the very society that once fed on them. You hope you'll be different, but you don't know how. You write poems sometimes only in your mind, quiet little lines that no one will ever read, about light on water, about the sound of a flute in the next room, about a face you used to have before it belonged to someone else. There's a word the old philosophers use, autarkia, self-sufficiency, the goal of every citizen, the virtue of the free. You turn that word over in your head like a coin you'll never own. Self-sufficient. You'd settle for just self. But here in Athens, your body is an extension of another man's reputation. Your silence is part of his decorum. And your absence from the law books is not a mistake. It's the system working exactly as designed. So you stand straight. You smile when summoned. You serve the wine with grace. You keep your voice soft, your movements elegant, your face unlined. And every night when you lie in your narrow bed and listen to the distant laughter of men debating justice and freedom, you wonder, how can a place that invented democracy build a life like this? Some people train to become scholars, others to become warriors. You were trained to notice things, not with parchment and ink or swords and shields, but with your body, your face, and the finely tuned sensitivity that comes from living on someone else's whim. You're fluent in the smallest shifts of tone, the tightening of your patron's jaw, the slow exhale before a command, the flash of boredom in his eyes that says, "Entertain me," without a word. You weren't born this way, but necessity is a brutal teacher. Now it's instinct. You wake before dawn, not out of diligence, but out of anxiety. You prepare his bath, not out of kindness, but because a cold bath will ruin his mood for hours. You place a folded cloth beside his sandals because last week he barked at you for leaving footprints on the polished stone. The lesson was swift and silent. They call it intuition. They call you attentive. But what it really is, what you have cultivated, is survival through anticipation. This too is training, and it's relentless. Your patron has routines, but no real predictability. One evening he's indulgent, generous, even playful. The next he's curt, distracted, or cruel. You're not given explanations, you're given instructions. And you're expected to respond as though every shift in his behavior is your fault, or worse, your responsibility to fix. He doesn't beat you, not exactly, but there are other forms of punishment. You've been ignored, sent to sleep without dinner, made to wait in a corner of the room for hours in complete silence while he spoke with friends, occasionally glancing at you like a piece of furniture that no longer suited his aesthetic. You've had music lessons revoked, nice garments taken away, replaced with plain ones, small humiliations wrapped in silken civility, and still you smile. The other servants think you're lucky. They would never say it to your face, but you've heard them whisper. He eats better than we do. His hands are softer than mine. He doesn't carry buckets. They don't know what it feels like to be a performance, to wake up every morning and assemble yourself, posture, tone, smile, like parts of a costume. A curious detail you once overheard the philosophers who praise mentorship between older and younger men, the ones who wax poetic about shared wisdom and moral development, never mention what happens when that relationship is enforced. When one person is there out of need, not choice. When the teaching looks suspiciously like control. Historians still debate whether those philosophers believed their own words or simply created a polite fiction to justify what they enjoyed. You've learned not to ask. You keep your eyes lowered just enough. You modulate your laughter to match the volume of others. You never eat the last fig. You wait half a beat before sitting just to make sure he won't change his mind and ask you to stand instead. At meals you sit just slightly behind him to the right. He says it's your best angle. The guests notice you, of course. That's the point. You're the centerpiece. He wants them to see you and envy his taste, his wealth, his power. And so you learn to radiate just enough presence to be admired, but not so much that it disrupts the flow of conversation. You're not the show, you're the glow. Sometimes he touches your arm while speaking, not affectionately, possessively, as if to say, "This is mine. Watch how obedient he is." And you are, because you've learned what happens when you aren't. You've learned how to pour wine so it doesn't spill. how to refill a cup without blocking the speaker's view, how to laugh without showing too much teeth, how to nod as if you understand the finer points of rhetoric even when the conversation is far above your education level. It's all performance, all delicate, all exhausting. But there's a strange kind of pride in doing it well. You remember one evening he hosted a small gathering of poets and thinkers. One of them, drunk on sweet wine, asked if you were trained or simply born so tame. Your patron laughed. He listens, he said. That's all anyone needs to know. You said nothing, but inside you seethed, not with rage is too loud for your life, with something slower, sourer, something like corrosion. Because the truth is, you do listen. You listen better than any of them. You hear what's said and what isn't. You hear the tremble in the voice when someone's lying. You hear the half-second pause when a joke lands wrong. You hear when silence means leave, and when it means stay close. You could navigate a room blindfolded and still know who is in power just by the way the air moves, but none of that is called intelligence. Not for someone like you. It is called natural grace. Good breeding, a soft temperament. There's another boy now, a new one. He's maybe 13, too young to be in your position. Not yet. But you know he's on his way. He watches you like you once watched another, with admiration and envy and fear. You want to warn him, tell him to fake a limp, to eat more, to scar his face somehow. But you don't, because what good would it do if not here then elsewhere? There's always someone willing to pay for beauty, always someone eager to shape a boy into a reflection of their own fantasy. And you've already been shaped. Sometimes in your dreams you are clumsy. You trip on purpose. You speak out of turn. You spilled the wine and let it stain the expensive rugs. But when you wake, you are already smoothing the fold of your tunic, already listening for footsteps, already aligning yourself with the expectations of the day. Your patron speaks of honor sometimes, of legacy, of how men are remembered. You don't think you'll be remembered. There are no statues of boys like you, no poems sung in the agora, no names carved into pillars or painted on urns. Your life is footnotes and rumors, if that. Your name, if ever spoken again, will be in whispers or jokes or as a passing mention in a legal dispute over inheritance. But you exist. You exist in the margins of their glory, in the shadows of their philosophy, in the silence between the lines of their epic verses. And that in a strange way is a kind of legacy too, because while they pretend this life doesn't exist, while they erase your kind from the narrative, you remain. A quiet truth, a reminder, a presence. You're the glance exchanged across a symposium, the figure in the corner of a fresco, the song sung by a lyre player who refuses to name his muse. You are the cost of their comfort, the price of their power, and you're still standing. The sun has long dipped below the horizon, and the villa's courtyard glows with flickering lamplight. The air smells of roasted lamb incense and the heady sweetness of wine. It's symposium night. Again. And that means you are not a person, you are atmosphere. The men recline on plush couches arranged in a perfect horseshoe, each one dressed in elegant chitons, some with garlands already slipping from their brows. Their laughter is frequent, their gestures wide, their voices rich with confidence and too much diluted wine. You stand to the side perfectly still, at least for now. You're not furniture. Furniture doesn't blush. Furniture doesn't ache. Furniture doesn't hold its breath when it hears its name said like a punchline. But still, you're expected to act like it. Your job is to fill in the empty spaces, to soften the edges, to make the night feel more beautiful. So you wait, listening. Tonight the men discuss beauty, of course. It's always beauty, and courage, and virtue. They quote Plato and Euripides. They argue whether the soul of a man should be more beautiful than his face. Someone chuckles and says, "Depends on the boy." There's a knowing smirk in your direction. You don't react. You've learned not to. Your patron waves you over. You glide forward, refill his cup, adjust the cushion at his elbow, and take a single step back. Not too far. He likes you visible. The room is thick with smoke and music. A flute player sits in the far corner, fingers dancing over the mouthpiece. You envy him. He has a role that's clear, defined, his worth measured in breath and melody. Yours is more nebulous. You're here to please, but how and when and to what degree changes by the minute. And yet there's an art to it, an invisible choreography. You know when to laugh gently, when to avert your gaze, when to smile just enough to seem mysterious, but not so much that you seem flirtatious, unless flirtation is expected. Then you pivot, instantly. One of the guests, a man with too much cologne and not enough self-restraint, beckons you closer. You hesitate for a blink too long. Your patron's eyebrow lifts. So you obey. The man jokes that your silence is charming, that your quiet eyes hide oceans. You want to tell him they hide nothing. Nothing is hidden anymore. Your soul is as naked as your knees beneath this tunic. Instead, you pour his wine. He touches your wrist. You pretend not to notice. Your patron watches. He sees everything. You know this is a test, not of loyalty, of usefulness, of pliability. You pass it, because that's what you do, because this is what you are. A curious detail about these symposiums in public discourse, they are described as noble gatherings of free men occasions for poetry, politics, and music. But everyone knows what happens as the night wears on. The philosophy thins, the wine thickens, the air shifts. By the second jug, talk of virtue fades. By the third, it's hands on thighs, soft murmurs, suggestive glances. That's when you feel yourself dissolve from person to ornament to opportunity. Historians still debate whether these social rituals were intended as intellectual salons or thinly veiled indulgences for the elite. But from where you always stand, it's obvious. These nights are about power. Who has it? Who wields it? Who's allowed to act without consequence? And who isn't? Sometimes you're asked to perform. Not sexually, not yet, but artistically. To sing, to recite a poem, to play the lyre. Your fingers tremble slightly when you pluck the strings, not from fear, but from restraint. You know the performance must be perfect and effortless and humble and haunting. Anything less, and you're disappointing someone. And disappointing someone here carries costs. They applaud softly, more out of appreciation for your beauty than your skill. That applause isn't for your voice, it's for your obedience. Later, one guest asks your patron if you're available for the night. He laughs, says you're not for hire. Not yet. The man raises his cup. Such a pity, he'd fetch a fine price. You don't move, don't blink, you are porcelain. The conversation swirls on. You stay near, refilling, smiling, posing. Inside you are screaming, but no one hears it. They hear the music. They hear each other, they hear the clinking of cups, but not you. You are background. As the night drags into stars and silence, the guests begin to drift away. Their words slur their sandals uneven against the mosaic floor. You clear the cups, gather the cushions, extinguish the lamps. You smell like wine and oil and expectation. You don't speak unless addressed. You don't yawn, you don't sigh, you just endure. When your patron dismisses you with a nod, it feels like a gift, a moment of mercy. But it's not. It's routine. The performance is over. The stage is dark. And now you get to return to your box. Your room. You undress slowly, folding the tunic just as you were taught. You wash your face, you rub oil into your arms, you check for bruises. There are none, not visible ones. You lie down. The window above your bed shows only stars, cold and perfect, so far away. You remember being a child, staring up at the same sky, back when stars were wishes. Now they're just distant lights, things that burn quietly and unnoticed. Like you wonder if you'll be summoned again tonight. Sometimes he waits until you've nearly fallen asleep before he calls. Sometimes he doesn't. The unpredictability is part of the game. So you don't allow yourself to sleep deeply. Just a light doze, like a bird perched too low on a branch. Every creak of the house is a summons. Every wind gust through the courtyard feels like footsteps. Your body remains alert even when your mind begs for rest. This is not rest, this is pausing. This is performance even in darkness. And if the summons never comes, if the night passes quietly, you wake in the morning, still tired, still aching, still someone else's property in all but name. The new day begins. The sun rises, the wine stains are gone, the laughter has faded. But you remain. You who are not a guest, not a host, not a participant, just presence. They say ancient Athens was the cradle of democracy, of beauty, of thought. But they never mention the boys like you, because to speak your name would mean admitting that freedom in this city of philosophers and poets was never meant for everyone. You know the art of silence better than most orators know the art of speech, and tonight, like every night, you wield it the way a swordsman wields his blade. Precisely, elegantly, always ready. You don't speak unless he wants you to. You don't laugh unless he needs to hear it. Your silence isn't emptiness, it's effort. Every unsaid word, every unvoiced opinion, every feeling carefully locked away behind your eyes is a piece of armor, and you wear it all the time. This is not the kind of silence that soothes. It doesn't comfort like the hush of a peaceful garden or the stillness before dawn. No, this silence is heavy, stifling. It swells in your chest until you can barely breathe, and yet it protects you. You learn the consequence of speaking too early or too truthfully, like the time you corrected your patron's misquote of a line from Euripides. You were trying to be helpful. You thought he'd be impressed. He wasn't. He turned toward you, lips tight, and said, "Your place is to listen, not to lecture." He didn't need to say more. You weren't punished with strikes or screams, just 3 days of deliberate icy indifference. No eye contact, no summons, no food brought to your quarters, nothing. Just enough absence to remind you where the power truly sits. So now you stay quiet. It's curious, isn't it, how much power silence can carry? Not yours, of course. His. The power to deny you the right to speak. The power to make you vanish without ever moving your feet. Historians still debate whether concubines were trained intentionally in this silence or if it developed naturally a side effect of being reduced to background scenery. But whether by design or necessity it becomes your mother tongue. The city outside is full of voices, merchants haggling, priests chanting, children shouting across courtyards. But none of that belongs to you. You're kept indoors for the most part. Not locked away, not technically. But you know better than to wander. Out there, the risk of being seen, truly seen, is too great. The neighbors know who you are, or at least they know what you are. They don't greet you, they look through you, past you. You passed a group of citizen boys once no older than you. They were coming back from the gymnasium, skin slick with sweat, olive oil, and laughter. They caught sight of you as you turned the corner. One of them muttered something under his breath, and the others laughed. You didn't ask what he said. You didn't have to. You've heard enough variations to know the melody by heart. Your silence, your softness, your careful walk, your quiet existence. They think it marks you as weak. You wonder if they could last a day in your place. You spend a lot of time watching. Observing, learning in silence what others shout in classrooms. You listen to debates between your patron and his friends. You pick up on legal phrases, rhetorical flourishes, political gossip. You could probably mimic them if anyone asked. No one ever will. The knowledge piles up in your mind like scrolls in a library no one visits. Beautiful, useless. There are moments, of course, when silence becomes unbearable. When your chest aches with words. When you want to scream, to shout, to name every wrong, every humiliation. But there's nowhere for those words to go. No one to hear them. No one who would care. So you write poems in your mind. Small, fragile things. Sometimes a few lines, sometimes entire stories. They're not for anyone else. They're just to remind yourself that something still lives inside you. That not all of you belongs to him. You once started one in the kitchen whispering lines under your breath as you peeled pomegranates. The cook caught you raised an eyebrow and asked, "You talking to ghosts?" You smiled and said nothing. Better to be thought eccentric than insolent. Better always to say less. You've noticed how others in the household avoid your gaze, especially the female servants. They treat you like a stain on the marble. Like your presence makes the whole room uncomfortable. Not because of what you've done, but because of what you remind them of, power and the absence of it. A curious detail, the laws of Athens were extremely strict about reputation. A free citizen accused of unmanly behavior could be stripped of his right to speak in the assembly. He could be shamed publicly, humiliated. But those rules don't apply to you. You can be touched, used, displayed, and still remain legally unspoken for. Because you are not a citizen. You are not protected. You are not. Sometimes when your patron hosts a guest, he gestures for you to sit near. Not beside. Near. Like a vase, like a lamp. He talks about you in the third person. As if you're not there. As if you are a fine object, not quite human. He's well behaved, he says. Hasn't given me trouble yet. And you nod. Because what else is there to do? Sometimes his guests touch you in passing. A brush of the hand on your shoulder, a too long glance. Once a man tapped your chin and said, "Pretty lips. Do they sing?" You did not flinch, but later, when you were alone, you clenched your jaw until it ached. Silence again, your best defense. It's not always like this, of course. Some days pass quietly, uneventfully. He's away on business, or busy with legal matters. And in those hours when the villa is still, when no one is watching you speak, not loudly, never loudly, but you let your voice out, just a little. You whisper poems into the air. You name the things in your room. You hum the songs your mother sang to you as a child. You reclaim your voice in the privacy of absence. You even smile sometimes when no one is looking, just to remember what it feels like. Historians rarely write about the private moments of people like you. You don't end up on amphora or in scrolls. Your silence is too complete to be recorded, but it existed. It still exists. Your voice might be a whisper now, but you know what it used to be. And maybe one day what it might be again. For now you wait. You listen. You endure. And somewhere deep inside the stillness, the silence sharpens not into surrender, but into steel. The morning air smells like citrus leaves and ash. Somewhere in the courtyard, a slave is already sweeping. You hear the bristles against stone. Shiff, shiff, shiff. Slow, steady, careful. No one wants to wake the master early, especially not today. You rise when the light slants just right across the floor. The same way you've risen for months, years, you've lost track. You fold your blanket, wash your face in the cold basin, and prepare yourself to be invisible again. But there's a knot in your stomach this time, and you already know why. Last night a guest crossed the line. Not that there's a line, not really. Just a shifting haze of expectations and unspoken permissions. But you know what happened? His hand on your thigh, the comment about breaking in the way your patron laughed and didn't stop him. You can still feel the fingers. You can still hear the room laughing. It wasn't the worst thing that's ever happened, but it was one of those moments where the thread thins and you wonder just how much thinner it can get before it snaps. You tried to sleep. You really did. But your body wouldn't let you. Every time your eyes drifted closed, your ribs would tighten, your skin would crawl, and your thoughts would spin into places you didn't want to go. Now you sit at the edge of your sleeping mat, fingers twitching in your lap. Because today you still have to serve, still have to smile, still have to pour wine and hold cushions and be the beautiful thing everyone expects you to be. No one will ask how you feel. No one wants to know. You know better than to break the performance. You walk out into the corridor, bare feet soundless on the tile. You nod to the cook's assistant. She glances at you once quickly, then looks away. That's normal. Most of the household staff doesn't meet your eyes anymore. They don't know what to do with you. You're not one of them, but you're not one of them either. You're just there. Later in the morning, you're summoned to the private chamber. Your patron is seated reading a scroll. You bow slightly, hands folded. He doesn't look up. Sit. You do. He talks. Casual things. Politics. Weather. The state of the olive groves. He doesn't mention the guest. He doesn't ask if you're well. Of course not. Then, as if he's asking you to pass the figs, he says, "You embarrassed me last night." There's a pause, a long one, a thick one. You blink once, lower your head. He waits. You whisper, "I'm sorry." Even though you don't know what for, even though you aren't. He still doesn't look at you. Don't let it happen again. Then he waves his hand. You leave. And just like that, The conversation is over. The incident is over. The trauma is over. Except that it isn't. Because now you understand exactly how much your safety depends not on rules or laws or boundaries, but on the momentary mood of a man who believes you belong to him. And if he's ever angry enough, bored enough, cruel enough, he could destroy you. And no one would stop him. You've heard the stories. You know what happens to concubines who displease. Not necessarily a beating, that would be too crude, too messy for a man like your patron, but banishment, absolutely. Being thrown out with nothing but the tunic on your back, common. Passed to another man, very possible. There's no law protecting you, not from his whims, not from his guests, not from anyone. A curious detail in Athens. A citizen who struck another free man could be fined or punished severely. But if he struck you, nothing. If he humiliated you publicly, nothing. If he decided one day that you were no longer beautiful enough to keep around, still nothing. Historians still argue whether this lack of protection was deliberate, designed to preserve the complete control of the patron, or simply the result of a legal system that didn't see people like you as people at all. Either way, the result is the same. You are alone. The day passes slowly. You serve lunch. You tidy the symposium room. You help a scribe organize scrolls. All the while, your body moves automatically, your mind detached, hovering a few inches above your skin. You can't afford to live inside your body today. Not after last night, not after this morning, or this. So you leave it behind. You float. You pretend you're somewhere else. This is a skill. Dissociation, they would call it, if they had the language for it. You call it endurance. You don't cry. That would be dangerous. Not just because tears are seen as weakness, but because crying is a crack. And once you start cracking, it's hard to stop. You've seen it happen. You saw it in the boy who came before you. He started crying one night after a guest insulted him in front of everyone. He couldn't stop. The next morning, he was gone. No one said his name again. You learned from that. So you keep smiling. You keep walking gracefully. You keep your voice gentle and even when your heart is racing, even when your mind is spinning, even when you feel like screaming. Because this is the job, this is the performance. It's strange. You're not a slave, you're not a citizen, you're not a guest, you're not family. You are owned but not legally, desired but not respected, present but not acknowledged. You're a contradiction with a pulse, and contradictions don't get right. At dinner, your patron praises you, to his friends. Quiet, he says, reliable. They nod approvingly. One of them raises his cup, a fine one. You bow your head, you murmur thanks, and you pour more wine. Later, back in your room, you sit by the window. The moon is full tonight, silver and slow and watching. You whisper to it. Not words, just sound, just something to break the silence. Because no one else hears you. And if you never speak again, you wonder if anyone would notice. You think of the boy who's too young, still just running errands and learning how to hold a tray. He looks at you like you're something between a mystery and a warning. You want to tell him to run. But where would he go? The world isn't kind to pretty boys with nowhere to belong. And the villa is better than the streets. Sometimes, most of the time. You tell yourself that anyway. Because what else is there to believe? You lie down. You close your eyes. You listen for footsteps. There are none. Not yet. You drift off with the memory of laughter still echoing in your ears. Not yours. Never yours. You first heard the rumor from a kitchen servant casually as she peeled onions with steady, practiced hands. Her voice had been low, like she was sharing a ghost story, not a fact. They say in the East some of them get cut, turned into eunuchs, never grow beards, never grow old. You didn't ask what she meant. You knew. And ever since, that rumor has lodged itself in the back of your mind like a splinter. You can't reach just under the skin, just deep enough to ache when the room is too quiet. At first you thought it was an exaggeration, a myth maybe, one of those gruesome tales told to frighten boys into obedience. But the more you watched, the more you listened, the more you realized it wasn't just a story. It was a possibility. You met one once. A eunuch. He didn't work in your house, he belonged to a wealthy merchant from Ephesus, visiting for a few weeks. The man brought his entire household with him, including this attendant. He was older than you. Beautiful in a strange, ageless way. His voice was high and soft like a flute, his skin smooth as polished ivory. No beard, no body hair, and eyes that didn't blink enough. He moved like he was floating, perfect posture, perfect manners, perfect silence. But when your eyes met across the corridor, you saw something. Not quite pain, not quite recognition. Something deeper, like the space behind a closed door. Later, your patron referred to him as well-trained. You didn't sleep that night. A curious detail in some parts of the ancient world, particularly in the Persian Empire, eunuchs held immense power. They guarded royal women. They handled finances. They whispered into the ears of kings. Their altered bodies made them safe, and that safety became influence. But not here, not in Athens. Here a eunuch wasn't trusted with state secrets. He wasn't granted proximity to temples or family. He was a curiosity, a creature, a man undone. And yet there was always the chance that you could become one. Because in households like yours, private wealthy, full of unchecked whims, there were no limits except what the master could afford. You once heard your patron joke with a friend, after too much wine, if I had the coin, I'd keep him young forever. The words were casual, thrown into the air like a tossed olive pit, but they struck you like a hammer. Because what he meant wasn't poetry, it wasn't wistful, it was hypothetical. If I had the coin, historians still debate whether castration was common practice in Athens or merely an imported horror from the East. Some believe it was rare, too scandalous for Athenian taste. Others argue it was simply hidden, tucked away in the silence of villas like yours. Either way, the fact that it's possible is enough. You've checked your reflection more often since then. Not just for wrinkles, not just for blemishes, but for signs of fragility, of beauty fading, of your youth slipping. Because once you start slipping, your options become narrow. And that's when desperate men do desperate things. You imagine the scene sometimes. Not because you want to. Because your mind won't stop drawing it. A quiet conversation, a suggestion, a physician brought in under cover of night, a promise you'll never age. He'll keep you forever. Then the cold knife, the clean cloth, the silence. You imagine waking up less than whole, in a body no longer yours, and worse, in a body that still belongs to someone else. You've learned enough by now to know that mutilation isn't always physical. It can happen slowly, invisibly, with every compromise, every forced smile, every hour of obedience. But this would be final, irreversible. You try to push the thought away. You focus on the day's tasks, polishing bronze, folding garments, reading quietly in the corner while your patron naps. But the thought lingers. It hums under the surface of everything. At supper, he's in a good mood. He praises your new tunic. He offers you a bit of fig from his own plate. He calls you darling, and you smile. Because the performance must continue. Because fear wears many faces and sometimes it smiles back. Later that evening, as you're combing your hair, you find a grey thread near your temple. It's faint, almost silver in the lamplight. You pluck it quickly. No one can see this. Not yet. You lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much longer you have. Not before you're free. Freedom isn't even on the table, but before you're obsolete. Before someone younger, softer, newer takes your place. And what happens then? Do you get discarded, passed along, or altered? You've seen it before. A boy in another house suddenly absent for weeks, then returning changed, quiet in a different way, paler, slower, almost dull-like. He said nothing, just bowed and served, and kept his eyes on the floor. You don't know if he was one of them, but you suspect. You don't ask. No one does. Because the questions are dangerous, because the answers hurt. You think back to your first days in this house. You were too naive then to imagine how narrow your life would become. You thought there'd be safety here. Warmth, maybe. You told yourself that being wanted was better than being nothing. But now you know that being wanted can be a curse, that beauty can be a leash, that silence can be survival, and that one day, if the wrong words are said behind the right closed doors, your body could be made to match the obedience you've always been expected to perform. The thought makes your stomach churn, but you can't show it, you can't flinch, you can't break character. So you press your lips together, you smooth your tunic, you smile into the mirror rehearsing. Tomorrow you will be perfect again. Tomorrow you will be safe again. Tomorrow you will not be seen as replaceable or worse, as something that must be preserved at all costs. Because in this city of philosophers and laws and debates about justice, the body of a concubine is not protected. It is shaped, trimmed, displayed, altered, used, and only sometimes remembered. You can't remember the last time someone asked you how you felt. Not what you wanted or what you dreamed of or whether you slept well last night. Just something as simple as, how are you? Because no one does. Not the master, not the servants, not the guests who ask you to sing or serve or sit a little closer, not even the other boys when they pass you in the corridor and pretend not to look. You're expected to feel exactly one thing agreeable. You should smile even when tired, laugh even when the joke is at your expense. Sit patiently while the men talk about honor and dignity and the good life as if you are not sitting right there with your dignity evaporating quietly between sips of diluted wine. You might think surely there's room for affection. Surely if you do your part well, if you're charming, quiet, beautiful, useful, he'll return something like tenderness. And sometimes he does. A hand gently resting on your neck. A compliment murmured as he passes by. A gift, a fig, a bracelet, a rare scroll of poetry you are not expected to read, but which he thinks will look nice in your hands. And for a moment you feel warmth, but the moment passes, because each kindness is just another thread in the web. A reinforcement of the power imbalance. A reminder that affection here is currency, not connection. And you are not holding the purse. A curious detail, some schools of Greek philosophy, notably the Stoics, praised emotional detachment. They called it apatheia, freedom from passion, from turmoil, strength through self-control. Your patron sometimes quotes them. Don't indulge your feelings, he told you once. It weakens the soul. But you wonder if he truly believes that, or if it's simply convenient. Because when you're the one in power, denying others' emotional needs can look a lot like discipline. Historians still debate whether this philosophical mindset helped perpetuate emotional neglect within unequal relationships like yours, or whether it was just an excuse to ignore humanity in favor of hierarchy. Either way, it doesn't really matter, because you're still here, still present, still smiling, even as you're starving for something deeper. You used to hope he'd speak to you at night, not for commands, not for requests, but for real words. You imagined him saying, "Tell me about your day," or "What do you dream of?" even something as small as "Did you enjoy the figs?" But that's never happened. He only speaks to you in verbs, bring, sit, stay. And so you stop waiting. You bury your hopes with the other delicate things, your first name, your favorite color, your old laugh. They don't serve you here. Sometimes after everyone's gone to sleep, you find a quiet place in the garden near the olive tree where the moonlight pools gently on the ground, and you whisper things aloud. Not loud enough for anyone to hear, just enough to remember that your voice exists. You say things like, "I used to love swimming. I miss the smell of baked bread in my mother's kitchen. There was a girl once back home who gave me a plum and told me I looked like someone in a dream." And then as quickly as you spoke, you close your lips. You tuck it all away. Because emotion has no place in a house like this. You've seen what happens when someone lets it spill. One evening, a boy, one of the junior house slaves, was slapped by the steward for knocking over a jug. The boy cried. Not loud, just a single sob, small and involuntary. You saw the way the air changed, the way the other servants stiffened, the way the steward's eyes narrowed. Later that night, the boy was sent away, not punished publicly, just removed. You never saw him again. So now when you feel the tightness in your throat, you press your tongue to the roof of your mouth. You breathe through your nose. You wait for the emotion to dissolve like salt in water. You've become good at this. Your face is a perfect mask. Your tone is always level. Even your footsteps are quiet, just soft enough to feel like you were never there. And in a way, that's the goal. To disappear in plain sight. To become indispensable without ever becoming seen. You keep a collection of memories like pebbles in your mind that no one can take. The time you snuck a bite of honeycomb from the kitchen and let it melt on your tongue. The way your patron once dropped a scroll and you caught it mid-fall without him noticing. The rhythm of your own heartbeat when the villa is silent. These are yours. These are real. They remind you that you exist beyond the surface. But it's a fragile thing, this interior life. A tiny flame flickering in a cold wind. And every day you wonder how long you can keep it alive. Because it would be easier in some ways to go numb. to become the role entirely, to live only for commands, praise, and appearance. Some boys do. You've seen it. They lean into the performance until it's no longer performance. They become the ghost in the silk robe, the whisper beside the couch, the smile without eyes. But not you. Not yet. You still think of home, of laughter unmeasured, of arms that held you without wanting anything back, of the time before your body became a currency and your presence became performance. You miss being touched without tension. You miss being looked at without expectation. You miss the sound of your own name said with affection. Your patron doesn't use your real name anymore. He calls you my boy, darling. You. And it's strange how quickly a name fades when no one says it aloud. One night, while clearing the table, you say your own name under your breath. Just once. It sounds foreign, but beautiful. You say it again. You whisper it into your hands like a prayer. Because even if no one else remembers it, you do. And that means somewhere beneath the layers of silence and obedience and fear, you are still there. Still human. Still whole. Still waiting to be heard. The next day begins the way all of them do, quietly, predictably, with the illusion of peace. The courtyard is swept. The figs are arranged in their bowls. The oil lamps are refilled. The household hums like a well-oiled machine, and you are part of that hum. Except today your patron has guests. Important ones. And that means you'll be on display. Not in an official way, there will be no announcement, no introduction. But as always, your presence will be part of the environment. You're the scent of incense, the gleam of bronze, the delicate flower in the bowl that makes everything feel just a bit more refined. You prepare the same way you always do a bath in cool water, a tunic of pale linen that clings slightly at the shoulders, hair combed and scented with a trace of myrrh. Not too much, just enough. The steward brings you a necklace. It's fine, gold delicate, unnecessary. But that's the point. You clasp it without comment. Your appearance today isn't just about beauty, it's about wealth. Your patron doesn't say it aloud, but everyone knows owning something exquisite proves power. And what could be more exquisite than a beautiful, silent, obedient boy? You assume your position near the back of the room, close enough to be summoned, far enough not to interrupt the conversation. The men begin to arrive. Scholars, magistrates, an ambassador from a neighboring polis. You recognize some of them from previous symposiums, their voices familiar, their laughter performative. They settle into low couches, servants pour wine platters of olives and cheese are passed around. Your patron is in fine form today, gracious, articulate, full of flattery. He speaks of poetry, of Plato, of naval routes along the Ionian Sea. He quotes Homer. He teases the ambassador. He basks in their attention. You stand still, focused, calm. And then it begins. The ambassador notices you. He's older, wealthy. His beard is trimmed too sharply, his fingers heavy with rings. He gestures lazily in your direction. Is he new? Your patron smiles. Not new, just well-preserved. The men laugh. The ambassador waves you closer. You step forward with the elegance you've practiced every day of your life here. He studies you like one might study a painting or a prized horse. You train them well in Athens, he says. Your patron doesn't correct him. You lower your gaze and wait. The ambassador places 2 fingers under your chin, lifts your face to better see your eyes. Do you sing, he asks. You nod once. Good, he says later then. You retreat. But inside the knot tightens. You've been through this before. You know the pattern. The guest grows intrigued. He makes comments. Maybe a request. Maybe more. And you perform. Because refusal is not an option. Because your body's not yours. Not here. A curious detail, some Athenians believed that having a beautiful concubine in the household was a sign of refinement, not unlike owning fine art or rare books. It showed you had taste, wealth, and influence. The concubine was a status symbol. Historians still debate whether this objectification was softened by genuine affection in any cases, or whether any semblance of care was just another layer of performance designed to keep the possession from breaking. Either way, affection is not what you're shown tonight. Later, when the conversation slows and the wine flows thicker, your patron calls for music. The lyre is brought out. You're told to sing. You don't hesitate. You take the lyre seat yourself on the cool tile floor and begin. Your voice is soft, controlled. You sing a love song from your childhood village, an old folk melody. No one in the room understands the words, but they like the sound. The ambassador closes his eyes and smiles. You keep your eyes on the instrument, on the strings. You don't want to see their faces. You don't want to see what your voice is doing to them. But you sing beautifully, you have to. Because if you falter, if your voice cracks, if you appear unwilling, that is disrespect. And disrespect is dangerous. When you finish, there's soft clapping, a murmur of approval. The ambassador says he should visit us in the spring. Your patron only smiles, and you feel your stomach turn, because you know what that means. An arrangement, a favor, a week in another man's villa, a transaction dressed as a hospitality. You smile. You bow. You leave the room with the grace of a ghost. Back in your quarters, you close the door gently. You lean your forehead against the wall. You stay there for a long time breathing. The necklace is still around your neck. You unclasp it and set it on the table like it's burning your skin. You want to scream, but you don't. You've never screamed. Even when you were first brought here. Even when you realize what your life would become. Because screaming draws attention. And attention for you is never safe. Instead, you sit. You breathe.
You wait.
Eventually the night ends. The guests leave. The lamps are snuffed. And just before sleep, your patron appears at your door. He doesn't say much. Just one sentence. You did well. And then he's gone. You close your eyes. You want to believe that somewhere deep down he means it kindly. But you know better. He means it the way one might praise a servant for keeping the fire going, a horse for running well, a tapestry for catching the light. You're not a partner. You're not a companion. You are a reflection of his status, his taste, his control. You are proof of his refinement. And tomorrow when he meets with the ambassador to discuss trade routes and taxation, you will not be mentioned, only shown, like a coin, like a relic, like a boy-shaped shadow of something they don't want to name. The next morning brings a brittle calm, the kind that lingers after a storm, not because everything is fine, but because everything is still. The villa is quiet unnaturally so. The laughter from last night is gone, and all that's left are the faint echoes, a forgotten wine stain on the marble, a sandal left askew near the doorway, a broken fig stem. You wake early as always. Not because anyone told you to, but because your body no longer sleeps past dawn. It doesn't trust itself to rest that long. You rise, bathe, dress, and comb your hair with practiced hands. The routine keeps the fear away, but only for a while. Because this morning, a new boy arrives. You see him from the balcony standing by the front entrance, nervous and thin, and holding a bundle of fabric under one arm. His chiton is too short and patched at the hem. His sandals are cracked. His eyes dart everywhere like a fawn smelling smoke. You watch as he's ushered inside by the steward, given a cup of water, and led down the corridor to the servants' quarters. The same path you once took. He's maybe 13. And just like that, your stomach sinks. There's a new one. You knew it would happen. You've known for months. The way your patron's eyes had been scanning the younger boys at the market stalls. The way he didn't call for you quite as often. The way he praised your appearance with a faint edge of nostalgia. The villa has always been too quiet when change is coming. And now it's arrived. You cross paths with the boy just before the midday meal. He's carrying a tray, eyes fixed on the floor, walking like each step is a test. You make space for him in the hallway, and still he flinches as he passes you, mumbling a stammered apology even though you said nothing. You don't speak. What would you say? Run. There's nowhere to go. Fight. Against what? Trust me. How could he? He doesn't know what he's become yet. Not really. Right now he thinks he's here to help, to learn, to earn his place. Maybe he was told he'd be a page, an assistant. A lucky boy chosen to live in a grand house and serve a respected man. That's how it always begins. A curious detail in Athens, wealth often justified silence. When a powerful man took in a youth, there was rarely gossip unless it disrupted something public, an engagement, a legal dispute, a political rivalry. Behind closed doors, as long as everything looked polished and appropriate, no one asked questions. Historians still debate whether this societal discretion was a form of protection for vulnerable boys, or simply a mechanism that allowed exploitation to flourish unchecked. But you don't need books to explain what you see. You are the living record. In the afternoon, your patron summons you. You enter his study and find him seated at his desk, writing something with a reed pen. He doesn't look up when you arrive. You'll help train the new one, he says. That's all. A sentence like a blade. You nod. Because of course you will. You're the example now. He doesn't dismiss you, but you leave. You know your cue. The next few days unfold in slow, aching inevitability. You show the boy how to carry wine jugs without spilling, how to fold the ceremonial tablecloths, how to adjust a lyre string just right before a gathering. You demonstrate how to walk shoulders soft, head lowered, but not slouched. Graceful, but never bold. He watches you closely, too closely, like you're a manual for survival. Sometimes he asks questions. Should I smile when he talks to me? Do I stand next to him or behind? Will I have my own room? You answer gently but vaguely. You don't want to frighten him. You also don't want to lie. Eventually he stops asking. He just copies. He begins to mimic the tilt of your head, the angle of your bow, the rhythm of your footsteps. You catch him practicing in the hallway one night, rehearsing how to say, "Yes, master," with the right mix of politeness and emptiness. And in that moment, something inside you breaks. Because you remember being him. You remember looking at the boy who came before you and wondering, is this how I'll become? Now you know the answer. Yes. Yes, it is. And now it's happening again, through you. This is how the cycle survives. Not with whips and shackles, but with imitation, with silence, with boys training boys how to disappear. Later that week, the boy is asked to join the evening gathering. Not as a guest, not as a servant. Just to stand, just to smile, just to be seen. You watch from the corner of the room as your patron places a hand on the boy's shoulder and says he's learning quickly. Quick hands, quiet, obedient. The guests nod. One murmurs something about the boy's hair. Another asks if he sings. You feel nausea bloom in your chest like heat. But you do nothing. Because what could you do? You're not the master of this house. You never were. You're a flower wilting in a vase, still technically beautiful, but just slightly faded. Still there, still smiling, but no longer new. After the guests leave, the boy asks you, "Did I do well?" You look at him. His eyes are bright, hopeful, desperate. And all you can do is say yes. Because to say otherwise would be cruel. And you've lived through enough cruelty to know that kindness, even laced with sorrow, is sometimes all you can offer. Later that night, you lie in your bed and stare at the ceiling again. But something's changed. For the first time, you feel something new. Not anger, not grief, not fear. Guilt. Guilt because part of you is relieved. Relieved that the gaze is shifting. That you're no longer the center of attention. That maybe you'll be spared for a while. And that relief, that selfish flicker of peace makes you feel sick. Because you know what's coming for him. You've lived it. And now it's his turn. You want to protect him. But you also want to be left alone. You hate that the world has put you in this position. You hate that you even have to feel this way. And you hate that it won't stop. Not for him. Not for the one after him. Not until someone breaks the cycle. But tonight, it continues. Just like it always has. That night after sleep finally claims you, you dream of the kitchen boy. Not the new one. Not the one with soft eyes and an unsteady tray hand. But the one from years ago, the one who used to smuggle you extra figs when no one was watching. The one who whispered funny things about the magistrate's wig and made you laugh out loud when you weren't supposed to. He's older in the dream. Free somehow, wearing traveler's clothes and dust on his shoulders. He smiles at you like you matter. And in the dream you believe it. But when you wake, all that's left is the cold. Morning light slices across your blanket and everything feels heavy again. Another day, another performance. Your feet find the floor. Your hands fold your blanket. You recite your tasks for the day like a prayer, water the plants, polish the trays, prepare the cushions for the midday meeting. Smile. Wait. Serve. No one will ask how you're feeling. But by now you've stopped expecting that. The new boy is already up standing outside the bathing room with his hair damp and freshly combed. He greets you with a tentative nod. You nod back. Neither of you speak. The silence says enough. You notice he's still wearing his old sandals. The leather cracked the straps too loose. You remember what it was like to walk around in clothes that made you feel out of place. How you'd try to shrink your body just a little to make yourself less visible. Later that day, you find a spare pair in the storage chest a size too large, but clean, supple, and soft at the sole. You leave them by his mat without a word. That night he says thank you, quietly. You say nothing, just offer a small quick smile and move on. You don't want him to get attached. But a part of you already has. Because as much as you try not to care, as much as you want to detach and float, you still feel the sting in your chest when you hear the steward speaking about him behind the column. They always come in like that, shy small. Give it a few weeks and he'll be just like the last one. Pretty little shadow. Pretty little shadow. That phrase clings to you. You remember when they said that about you. The strange part, you almost miss it. Not the cruelty, the pain, the erasure, but the certainty. Back then, at least you knew what your role was. Now it's unclear. You're no longer the newest, no longer the main attraction. You still serve, still perform. But you're slowly fading from the center of the stage, and no one tells you what to do with yourself when the curtain shifts. You've become an artifact in your own life. You think about the other servants, the kitchen girls, the lamplighters, the courtyard attendants. How they look at you now, not with pity, not exactly, but with a strange kind of distance. They recognize your decline before you do. You're still treated with a certain deference. You're still his. But it's different, less prized, less polished. And in the rare moments when they do speak to you, their voices are tinged with something like relief. Relief that it's you and not them that you carried the burden. That they survived without being chosen. A curious detail about ancient Athenian households while citizens were theoretically the masters of their own domains, the real day-to-day life of a household was held together by unspoken hierarchies. Slaves, concubines, hired laborers, and distant relatives all inhabited the same walls but rarely the same world. Historians still debate whether these domestic spheres functioned as microcosms of democracy or as more rigid miniature kingdoms. What is certain is that for those at the bottom, especially the unclassified ones like you, there was no vote, no forum, no voice. You were seen, but not heard. Later that week, a guest arrives unexpectedly. A minor politician, round and ruddy-cheeked, known for laughing too loudly at his own jokes. You've seen him before. He always looks at you too long, always leans too close. But this time he doesn't call for you. He asks for the boy. Your patron hesitates. Just for a second, then nods. And something inside you goes quiet. You watch as the boy follows him into the symposium room carrying a pitcher of wine too heavy for his wrist. You see the way he blinks too often, how his lips press tight as he pours. You know that look. You know what it means. You tell yourself not to get involved. It's not your place. You're not anyone's protector. But later, after the guest has gone and the laughter has stopped, you find the boy sitting on the floor outside the corridor, staring blankly at the wall. His hands are folded neatly in his lap. His shoulders are stiff. You sit beside him, just close enough. He doesn't speak. You don't ask. After a while he whispers, "He touched my hair." You nod. More silence. He said I was a gift. Your throat tightens. You want to say, "You're not a gift. You are not a thing. You are not his to give." But the words don't come. You're not sure he'd believe you. You're not sure you believe it yourself anymore. So instead you say, "I know." That night you don't sleep. You sit by the window and stare into the sky. There's no moon tonight. Just stars. Pale, indifferent, impossibly distant. You remember a time when you believed in constellations, when the shapes in the sky meant stories, heroes and monsters, gods and fates. Now all you see is distance. And still you can't look away. Because even now, even after everything, some part of you still wants to believe there's a way out. A way forward. A life beyond the villa walls. A life where your name is your own. Where your silence isn't survival. Where your worth isn't measured by your beauty, your compliance, or your ability to perform. You don't know what that life looks like. You just know it isn't this. You glance down at your hands. They're steadier than they were years ago. Stronger too. Not from lifting anything heavy, but from holding yourself together. From enduring. And maybe that endurance is a kind of strength. Not enough to change everything, but enough to keep going. And for now, that's all you can do. Keep going. Keep breathing. Keep holding space for the boy, for yourself, for a future you might never see. But someone might, someday. The clatter of dishes echoes from the kitchen faint and far off as you step into the hallway with a pitcher of water balanced carefully in your arms. The villa is quiet in the late afternoon heat. Most of the household has retreated to shaded corners to wait out the sun. You, as always, are moving. You don't question why you're doing this instead of the boy. You already know. He's resting. That's what the steward said. which is another way of saying he was used too much last night, or maybe the guest was too rough, or maybe he simply cried in front of the wrong person. You were him once. Now you're the one left to sweep up the pieces. And strangely, there's a numbness to it. A dull familiarity, like a recurring illness you've learned how to tolerate. You move through the hall like a shadow with a job because that's what you are. The picture is heavier than it used to feel. Or maybe you're just tired. Your arms ache, your back twinges, your knees creak as you kneel beside the wash basin and pour the water carefully over clean cloths. You think about how even the simplest acts carrying water, wiping a brow, can be infused with grief when done without choice. Later, you find the boy in the garden. He's sitting beneath the pomegranate tree legs folded under him, staring at the gravel path like it might offer answers. You sit beside him. He doesn't move. Eventually you speak. Did he hurt you? He shrugs. That shrug cuts deeper than any words. Because you've learned that once the shrug arrives, it means he's already building the wall. The silence. The detachment. The story he'll tell himself so he can get through tomorrow. You know it well. You helped build your own. He finally says he gave me honey after. You nod even though your stomach turns. A curious detail about households like this, especially among the wealthy in Athens, is that after moments of violence or violation, small gifts were often offered. A sweet treat, a new tunic, a day of rest, not as apologies, as signals. Look how well I care for my possessions. Historians still debate whether these offerings were intended to soothe or control. But from your side of the story, there's little difference. A chain with a velvet ribbon is still a chain. You sit in the heat a little longer, the boy doesn't speak again, and you don't press him. Instead, you pluck a fallen pomegranate flower from the ground and hand it to him without a word. He takes it like it's fragile, and for a moment you see something in his eyes. Not hope, not yet, but maybe the echo of what hope once looked like. The next day you're called to the study. Your patron is writing as always, scrolls on scrolls. You suspect half of them are blank. He doesn't look up when he says you've been here a long time. You wait, because it's not really a question. I've made arrangements, he continues, for you to go to Thebes. Thebes! It takes a moment to register. I thought, you start then stop. You thought you'd be here forever. You thought he'd keep you as some patrons do until you wither, until you become a permanent fixture, a reminder of a past taste, a former beauty kept out of pity or pride. But no, apparently you're being relocated. He finally looks at you. The man there is discreet, wealthy, you'll be comfortable? You nod because what else is there to do? Your heart isn't racing, it isn't breaking, it's just suspended. You've known this was coming. Still, it hurts in ways you didn't expect. Not because you love him. You don't. Not because you'll miss him. You won't. But because even now, even after all of it, you don't get to decide. Your future is still someone else's handwriting on someone else's scroll, and you are still being passed from one hand to another. That night you walk through the villa like a ghost. You trace your fingers along the door frames, the mosaic tiles, the marble edges of the fountain. This was your prison, but it was your prison. You know every shadow here, every creaking board, every drafty window. You know where the olive oil is stored, which floor tile is slightly loose, which corner of the courtyard catches the morning sun just right. It's strange the way a cage can start to feel like home when you've lived in it long enough. You don't cry. You thought you might. But there's no grief left that hasn't already dried up. Instead, you go to the boy's room. He's sitting on his mat, folding laundry with too much care, like he's afraid of doing it wrong. You sit beside him. He asks, "Is it true you're leaving?" You nod. He doesn't speak for a long time. Then will it be worse there? You think about the stories you've heard of Thebes, of the sacred band of lovers, of the strange blurred lines between love and loyalty and control. You don't know the answer, so you say it'll be different. He nods. You want to tell him something meaningful, something lasting. You want to give him the thing no one gave you, but all you manage is, don't stop remembering who you were before. He looks at you. You place a hand over your chest. Whatever's still in here, that's yours. Don't let them take it. He nods again slowly. And you think maybe he understands. Maybe. You leave the next morning before the sun is up. There's no ceremony. No goodbye feast. Just a cart and a driver and a sealed letter from your patron to the man in Thebes. You sit in the back watching the villa fade behind you. And strangely you feel light. Not free, but lighter. The road ahead is unknown. There may be more pain. More performance. more silence. But maybe, just maybe, there will be something else too. A new corner of sky, a different window, a chance however small to become someone else, or maybe just to become yourself again, even if only in quiet moments, even if only in dreams. You touch your chest again as the cart bumps forward, and you hold on to whatever's still in there, whatever the world hasn't stolen. Not yet. The road to Thebes is dry and dusty, winding through olive groves and rocky hills. You pass shepherds guiding lean, sunburnt goats. Children wave from crumbling doorways. A woman sings as she stirs a pot over an open flame. Life continues out here, loud, messy, unpredictable. And strangely, that unsettles you more than the silence of the villa ever did. Because in the city, you knew your lines, your cues, the rules of your particular stage. But here there's too much sky, too much wind, too much that isn't polished or rehearsed. You sit still in the cart, hands folded neatly in your lap, trying not to think about what awaits you. Thebes is said to be more lenient than Athens when it comes to male companionship, more open, some say. Others say it's just better at pretending affection is mutual. You wonder which version you'll meet. The man you're being sent to is a merchant. That's all you know, trade in dyes and fabrics, comfortable, widowed, has a fondness for poetry. Your patron had said he's discreet, you'll be well kept. You wonder if well kept is supposed to be comforting. You arrive just before dusk. The villa is smaller than the one in Athens, but grand in a quieter way. Cypress trees line the entrance, and the walls are painted with faded images of centaurs and nymphs. Someone opens the gate without a word and waves the driver through. You are led to a courtyard and asked to wait. So you do. A boy brings you water. He's older than you, maybe 20. His eyes scan you with practiced indifference. He's done this before. Eventually, a man appears mid-50s tall, wrapped in a dark himation. Not handsome, not unkind-looking either. He glances at you once, then takes the letter from your patron and reads it slowly. He doesn't invite you to sit. When he's finished, he looks at you. Can you read? You nod. Play the lyre? You nod again. Good. You'll perform for my guests on holy days. Keep your hair tied back. Speak only when spoken to. He doesn't ask your name. You are shown to your quarters, smaller than before, but clean. A thin mattress, a bronze base, and a stool. The walls are blank. You sit on the bed and breathe. It isn't better than Athens, not yet. But it isn't worse. That's something. Over the next weeks, you learn the rhythm of this new house. The master is not cruel, not indulgent either. He's busy, distant. You are not his centerpiece, not yet. More like a tool waiting to be put to use. You serve wine, recite verses, play quiet music at evening meals. Guests come and go, but not in the same way as before. There's less performance here, fewer public displays. Everything happens in low tones with narrowed eyes and cautious pauses. In Thebes, people watch each other more carefully. One night, your master speaks to you over dinner. Your patron said you lasted 4 years. That's rare. You don't respond. He nods anyway. You must have been very agreeable. It's meant as a compliment. You smile faintly because you don't know what else to do. Then he says, you don't need to pretend here. Not all the time. That catches you off guard. He notices. I don't like masks, not unless I ask for them. You nod, unsure. He doesn't press. But the next morning, you're summoned early to his private quarters. He doesn't speak when you arrive, just gestures to a chair. He's reading from a scroll. When he finishes, he asks you to recite it back. You do. Perfectly. He raises an eyebrow. You listen well. That afternoon, he gives you another scroll. Read this. We'll discuss it tomorrow. And just like that, something shifts. You are not a concubine, not officially. There's no contract, no ceremony, no whispered vows by the fountain. But you are kept. He gives you clothes. Good ones. Fresh food, a room with a small window that looks out over the city wall, and books. That more than anything is the surprise. Scrolls, texts, fragments of Sappho, an old crumbling treatise by Anaxagoras, even a badly copied speech of Pericles. You read them by lamplight, tracing every line as if it's written on your skin. You wonder if this is a trick, a test, if he'll take them away one day to remind you they were never yours to begin with. But he doesn't. He just keeps bringing them. And sometimes after dinner, he asks you what you thought. Not what the scroll said, what you thought. It's a strange feeling to be invited into a conversation. Not as a performer, not as a possession, but as someone who might have something worth saying. You speak slowly at first, carefully, as if your words might break if they land wrong, but he listens. And that more than anything unnerves you. Because you're not used to being heard. A curious detail. Some scholars in Thebes believe that Eros love was not merely about pleasure or power, but a divine force that brought souls closer to truth. They called it the ladder. Each rung a higher understanding of beauty, wisdom, harmony. Historians still debate whether these beliefs were genuinely practiced or simply poetic ideals whispered to justify lopsided relationships. But here in this small villa under the shadow of Mount Helicon, you begin to wonder if perhaps there's room for something different. Not freedom, not yet, but recognition. You are not safe. Not truly. At any moment the scrolls could vanish. The kindness could curdle, the quiet could return. But for now you have a voice, a room, a name sometimes. He uses it once softly when handing you a cup of water. It surprises you so much you nearly drop it. He doesn't notice. Or maybe he does. Later that night, you sit at the window and watch the lights of the city flicker in the distance. Somewhere a flute is playing. Someone is laughing, a dog barks, a child cries. And all of it blends into a kind of music that feels like life happening loud, messy, real. And you, for once, feel part of it. Not a centerpiece, not a shadow. Just a person. Not quite whole, but getting closer. The seasons change slowly in Thebes. At first, it's just the wind. Colder, sharper, carrying the scent of earth and charcoal. Then the leaves begin to fall, and the streets quiet down in the evenings. Even the dogs bark less. The world seems to contract slightly, drawing inward. The city breathes more softly. Inside the villa, things remain unchanged on the surface. You still serve wine, still play music when asked, still greet guests with quiet nods and a well-practiced smile. But now something subtle has shifted. You are asked what you think, not often, and never when others are present. But in private, during the moments between silence and command, he speaks to you. He brings you scrolls about astronomy, about ethics, about history, and sometimes he asks you to read aloud not for his amusement, but for discussion. You begin to have thoughts again, not just reactions or calculations or the constant mental math of survival, but actual thoughts. Ideas that emerge uncoiled, like vines creeping back toward the light. You even write one down. Just a sentence. Then a paragraph. Then a full page. It's not a poem, not really. More like a memory shaped into rhythm. You hide it between two scrolls and never tell him. It's yours. One cold morning, he hands you a small package wrapped in cloth and tied with simple twine. Inside a stylus and a wax tablet. You look at him startled. He shrugs. You already think like a writer. Might as well start writing. You want to thank him. You try. But the words stick in your throat. You've spent so long saying only what others needed to hear, you've nearly forgotten how to speak from your own center. Later that night, you run your fingers over the blank surface of the tablet, and it feels like touching a door that might finally open. But even now you hesitate, because there's always a cost. You've learned that. No gift is without expectation, no kindness without strings. And yet, so far he's asked nothing of you. Not physically, not emotionally, not even praise. He just listens. And that in its own way is terrifying, because it makes you believe. Believe in the possibility, however fragile, that you could become someone again. Not a performance, not an ornament, not a beautiful echo of someone else's voice, but yourself. You begin to rise earlier, not out of fear, but out of eagerness. You wash and dress quickly, then write in the dim pre-dawn light just a few sentences each morning, trying to remember the feeling of having something to say. You remember the boy in Athens, his eyes, his questions, the way he flinched when praised. You wonder what happened to him. You wonder if he thinks of you. You wonder if he's still performing, or if he too has found a quieter space to exist. You'd like to see him again, but the past is sealed, and you no longer chase it. Instead, you begin to notice things around you, the way the lamp oil burns faster when the air is cold, the rhythm of footsteps in the corridor, the songs the cook hums under her breath while preparing meals. You begin to live again, not just survive. One night your patron invites you to dinner, just the two of you, not in the formal hall, but in the garden. He pours the wine himself, offers you olives and fish, no servants. You eat slowly on shore. He tells you of his youth, of the war he narrowly avoided, of the brother he lost, of the man he loved once long ago quietly. You listen, not out of obligation, but because no one else talks to you like this. Not as property, but as witness. You're not like the others, he says, almost apologetically. You look down. He corrects himself. I mean, you are, of course, but you're also more. It's clumsy, but sincere. And it makes something ache behind your ribs, because you've wanted to be more your entire life. After that night, the rhythm changes again. He gives you more freedom, asks fewer things, lets you walk the gardens alone. Once he sends you to the market with a servant and lets you choose your own sandals. It's a small thing, but it feels immense. You're not free. Not in any formal way. You still depend on his food, his shelter, his protection. But within those boundaries, a space has opened up. And you begin to fill it. You start writing regularly. Short pieces. Sometimes letters to no one. Sometimes quiet manifestos about dignity, memory, silence. You don't show them to him. Not yet. But one day you might. A curious detail in some regions of ancient Greece, particularly in later periods, former concubines were sometimes granted informal independence after a certain age, allowed to leave quietly with a modest pension or property as long as they didn't speak of their past. Historians still debate whether these gestures were acts of redemption guilt or mere convenience, removing the evidence once beauty had faded. You wonder what will happen to you when your beauty fades. You wonder if he'll let you stay. You wonder if you'll want to. But for now, the future is not a blade, it is a door. And that is enough. One evening alone in your room, you reread one of your poems. It's simple, just a few lines, but it ends with a question. If a voice is never heard, does it still echo? You whisper it aloud, and in the quiet afterward, you hear your breath, your heartbeat, yourself, still here, still yours. You take up the stylus. You write again. And this time you begin with your name.